And I regret not doing this when I took over the business and relocated it to California.
Thumbtack, your home advisor, your Angie's List, which one were good and which one were the waste of money?
That's really what it comes down to. A big part of it anyway. That's the first thing I would have done.
You have to stop them at what they do, get their attention, and have them engage with you for more than like 4 or 5 seconds.
You're right. Recycling that content's a really good strategy.
How common are scams?
When the concrete arrived, they added tons of water to the concrete. This is an old trick. I mean, we used to do this. This was like, we used to call this wet pours.
How long does concrete last if it's done right?
Work was done less than 3 years and has a problem. That number is increasing at least 10% a year for us. We're seeing number of leads that we get called for.
I would like to first talk about, you're in different industry. I would like to talk about marketing concrete company, or pick your brain how you would advertise concrete company today. If you would start a business today, what would you do? My first question would be, what kind of strategy would you have or do you have on the social media? How often do you post? What kind of content you post as a business owner of the concrete company? You have a small business, concrete company. How do you reach homeowners? What kind of content you post on the social media?
Got it. And you want me to just jump right in right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, right away.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing I would do is, and I regret not doing this when I took over the business and relocated it to California, I would study my competitors. I would have taken a lot more time to understand if I call and get a bid as a client, who are the companies that I'm seeing come up on Google or, different search engines and things like that. What do they charge? I would know every single person. I would know what they charge. I would know their strengths and their weaknesses, so that if I ever went out to quote a project, I would know just based on the questions they asked me. For example, if they said, "Well, don't you put your rebar 18 inches on center instead of 16, or 24 inches on center versus 18?" I would know, oh, they got a quote from this company, boom, and I would be able to handle that. So I would have done a lot more on the marketing research side of understanding the landscape, because that's really what it comes down to. A big part of it anyway. That's the first thing I would have done.
Reverse engineer, love it. How often do you post on social media to build your grow? Like, what do you do on social media? What's your strategy look like?
I'm guilty of this one. So I'm not a big social media guy. I like it. I see the value in it. We have a lot of clients that use it, but I think that the ones who are doing it well, and I don't claim to be the one doing this the best. So full disclosure, there's a lot of things I think I've figured out. This isn't my biggest strength by any means, but I think the ones that put a face behind a brand and make it more personal and connect are the ones that are doing well that I see. They're showcasing a lot of their work, which I think is cool. And they're doing have you seen I'm sure you have, the sped up videos where they'll take like a
Yeah,
bathroom and they'll tile it and
yeah,
they'll speed it up, or they'll do the
Time
construction.
lapses.
Yeah, time lapses. Thank you. And the construction fails are good too. But yeah, that's definitely not my I wouldn't say that's the one area where I feel like I'm toying with how much I want to be on social media and what that's going to look like for me.
well, what you've done is you've done a lot of podcasts, and I agree with you because people do business with people, not with the business. So if I connect with you as a business owner, I'm going to connect with your business as well, because people buy from businesses. And what you've done really well, more than most people in the industry, is you've reached out to podcasts. You've been guest expert on so many places. If anybody Google's your name, YouTube's your name, you're all over. Maybe it's not your place, your platform, but you're everywhere, and you showing up on Google searches and YouTube searches because of that. And now what you can do, and I would argue that it's amazing strategy, what you can do is you can take shorts and reels and beats and sound bites from all the interviews and literally create your own brand or upload it to your company. So now, like, if you think about Elon Musk and SpaceX, or Elon Musk and Tesla, he is as powerful, as big of the brand as his brand. So Dmitry Lipinski is as big as Roofing Insights. Yes, people do business with the Roofing Insights because of me and vice versa. And you've done it well for yourself. And the thing is, a strategy, you throw your face on the internet, you go as a guest to different podcasts, and then you recycle that content. So you can definitely do that.
Yeah, that's something I think, we need to spend more time doing, because you're right. I like the podcast. I like the connection. Posting for me on social wasn't as fun and as exciting. I think and this is an important topic. I think for business owners, there's different ways to achieve the same goal. I didn't like the holding the camera up and talking to it. I just felt weird. It wasn't my thing, but I love this. Like I really enjoy talking to people like you that, I respect and think have done great things. And you're right, recycling that content's a really good strategy.
What about your website? How important is a website for how competitive is a concrete space? Like how many concrete players usually per city? Like with the roofing industry, we have like 3,000 roofers in a city. Is concrete similar or you don't have as many players? Do you guys compete for Google AdWords? Because with us, it's like everybody competes with the same keywords and sometimes you pay $200 per lead, just per call, per click, which is insane. How expensive is pay per call and how much is your websites when you build it for your businesses?
So yeah, concrete industry is very competitive. It's extremely competitive, and it's one of those things where a lot of the competitors that are doing well are still pricing like it's early 2000s. I mean, stuff that like the
It's
prices
across
are
the
starting.
industries. We do that too.
Exactly. So, very competitive. And then you have this kind of modernization where some companies are, they're doing keyword testing, they're doing AdWords, they're doing SEO, they're doing blogs and content. So it's a very competitive space. I think so to answer your question and go back, there's thousands of competitors in my LA area. Masonry concrete, I've got general contractors I compete with. I mean, it's extremely competitive. And the one thing that I think can help a company is if you understand the market. So going back to my first point about reaching really reverse engineering, as you said it, the competitors, the next thing you can do is figure out what's the gap. So I'll give you an example. When I grew up on the East Coast with my family business, the the gap there was less craftsmanship and more about being a family business and doing the little things. It was like if you went to a restaurant and they did something really nice for you, like they came over and gave you a dessert for free. They're like, "Hey, really appreciate you coming in. It's your first time. Here, have some tiramisu on us. Like, come back next time." And you're like, "Whoa, wow, I can't believe they did that." Right? They might have had good food, but they did something to stand out. That was our unique proposition back east. When I brought the business to California 7 years ago, and I relocated it, I found that that was less important than craftsmanship. I realized that a lot of my competitors didn't know the old world concrete and masonry stuff that I knew. And that was the piece that people grabbed onto. So then, now going to the website and the part you mentioned, I was able to amplify those things in my headlines, in my keywords, in my social media, and even as far as taking pictures of, we have got like brochures that we give clients of like masonry done right and masonry done wrong, quote unquote. And so it's a really, because then what you can do is amplify the things that your market wants much more than just trying to compete with, slightly better concrete, or it's understanding that brand positioning.
Uh, talk to me about traditional marketing, flyers, billboards, radio stations, TV ads. What have you done? What did you have success with? What is that? What is like thing of the past from traditional marketing perspective? So we have new stuff, your ads, your platforms, your thumbtacks and stuff. But what doesn't work? What works from traditional standpoint?
That's a tough question because I spent a lot of time messing with different modalities, and what I found is I don't know that there's certain ones that are harder to track, right? Like if you put a billboard up, it's very hard unless you've got a good way of tracking that. It's hard to do that, but like we did, even there was a time where I did this campaign for there's historical neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and I did a lumpy mail campaign. So I bought these
What is lumpy mail campaign?
so so a lumpy mail campaign basically is mail that you would send out and it's lumpy. It's got something in it, so people are more likely to want to open it. I bought thousands of these plastic old like Polaroid cameras, but it was made out of plastic. It was a cheap version of it. And we wrote a letter that said basically, we were driving through your neighborhood and we noticed that, this is a beautiful historical neighborhood. And if there's parts of your house that aren't photo worthy, and that's what the camera was for,
Okay.
give us a call and we could upgrade it. And we did extremely well with this campaign. But before that, I had just tried the letter and it didn't work at all. Right. It was a letter basically saying, "Hey, our office isn't far. If you want to restore your beautiful home, give us a call." So I think, I've had success with mailers, flyers. With flyers, that strategy didn't work. What worked really well was we took Google Earth and we did before and after photos of driveways. So we used the street view, and I was able to take a concrete driveway or asphalt driveway and then show them three examples and be very targeted and custom. So, I didn't have great luck with billboards. I did digital billboards for a little bit. I did a trial campaign there, didn't do great. Driveway campaign didn't do great on radio, but we had a competition that we did, which was basically like a ugly driveway competition. Send in your photos in a winner. That did really well. So I think it's billboards as a whole, I would stay away from personally. I'm not a huge fan of those unless it's just brand awareness, and for us the market's so big. But a lot of these modalities, I think, if you try the right thing, if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer and try the right thing, it's trial and error. But I've had success with a lot of different ones.
Love it. What kind of videos have you made for your business that either generated some leads from social media, ads? What kind of video content have you produced that you would say, hey, that was successful? I would recommend every small business owner to do this type of videos.
Depending on the brand, so us going back to that statement about knowing that people want craftsmanship, educational videos did really well. So, I did one where I had the quarter test. Basically, if you could put a credit card or a quarter in the crack of your concrete, it was a sign that you should call somebody, right? So it helped people understand. They would, they'd call and they'd say, "Hey, a dime fit, but not a quarter." It was like we'd get these phone calls, and it was interesting to see it working. I also did videos at trade events. So I went to World of Concrete. I was a judge for the bricklayer competition,
Okay,
the
okay.
bricklayer 500, and I took content around me judging and at the event, and that did a lot to kind of elevate our brand without me being like, "Hey, we're really good at this."
Oh, very cool. And I agree. I did a fittest roofer competition over the years. So I remember like 3 years ago at the roofing expo, just simple test. You take a bundle of shingle weight 70 pounds and you hold it above your head. I remember uploading it to TikTok, like 1.6 million views like within 3 days. People just going crazy about it because you watch it's like how hard is it, but try to hold 70 pounds with one hand with the palm open, 2 minutes, that's all it takes. Like the top times were like 220, 230, and you have a big guys, but big means nothing. You have to have endurance, you have to have shoulders. Like roofers actually build different, the ones who do it all the time, right? So we have some big guys who couldn't hold it for a minute, and we have some skinny guys, but they build like they have good core, good shoulders, who could do it like 2 minutes. So it's very cool to see. Same thing, nothing to do with the business but people, that's what people like. You have to stop them at what they do, get their attention, and have them engage with you for more than like 4 or 5 seconds. And if you got their attention, if they watch you for a couple minutes, that's it. Like they're a customer for life. Now they share the moment with you together. So it's very, very cool, very interesting. The last question on the marketing is, what did you do as far as digital platforms? Any platforms that did work well for you? Thumbtack, your Home Advisor, your Angie's List. Which one were good and which one were the waste of money?
The breakthrough for me on the platforms was when I started. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I really got granular. I had a marketing mentor, and he showed me a file for a really big client that was doing, many hundreds of millions of dollars in a different industry. And he showed me how they tracked every little thing and how they never threw away a marketing campaign if it was profitable. And so what I did was I found out I had certain zip codes and certain services that I knew that if I could get a phone call, it was almost always worth it. Didn't matter what it cost. My PPC might have been, 280, $350 a lead. Didn't matter. I knew that it was the right neighborhood, right service, low competition. So for me, the lead platforms became about just going after, like, for example, on like, it's Angie now, but when it was Angie's List, Home Advisor, way back when it was Service Magic, like we it was about s- decreasing the zip codes, decreasing the services, and just going after what I call the bullseye or the outer bullseye. And so I think, like, for a while I'd shut those off. Like, Yelp wasn't the best for us at one point, and I just shut them off. But then I went back after my mentor and I turned them on with just my best services. And I didn't get a ton of projects, but I was still profitable and it still made sense. So when I changed the way that I used it, I got a much better result.
Love it. Very smart. But I agree with you. And recently, I actually rethink everything I've done with the Home Advisor and stuff because Home Advisor never worked for me in my business. And I would say 90% of people that I know of. But at the same time, I knew a couple companies that utilize it and they have great results. So sometimes it's pay to play. Sometimes those platforms work better with the bigger players. They treat you differently. Like you start spending money. Like it's almost like they internally turn the results different. Like, all right, this guy is important. Let's please him. And this guy is just, you know, crash and burn. So that's taking place too. I have a couple questions I wrote down. Let me go to my notes real quick. I have seen recently tons of concrete videos. Looks like it's a big trend in construction trades on TikTok. Like lots of chucking the trucks, lots of bad work, right? Like nightmare experiences. I actually just reacted to one where I think a guy in UK is coming in and chopping one because he didn't get paid, and he's like, "I'm not getting paid. You're not getting this driveway." How common are scams? How common is low quality work when people get paid and they just ruin the concrete job?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we see a lot. The problem with my industry is you got one shot to get it right. I mean, that's the hardest part about what we do versus almost any other trade. Is and there's no good way to fix concrete, especially if you're doing like,
Once it's said, it's said.
yeah, stamped concrete. Like if you're doing stamped or decorative, like you've got colors or textures. I mean, you can't patch it. There's no like, I mean, the amount of times we've gotten calls for jobs that I did one job where they hired a company and we lost the bid. It was a big parking lot and they poured the concrete, and after they did it, it all cracked. And so they ended up having to get a lawyer and I got involved, and we couldn't figure out why it cracked because there was pictures of the rebar. They had photos of them compacting the sub base, and I was doing an investigation and I asked them, I said, how many people, how long did the job take? Did it rain? What days? And he said, I was amazed when they did the pour. He said, they did this pour with like 8 guys. And I said, 8 guys. When I bid this, I had like 24 guys. I said, huh, send me the load ticket. And so what we found out was that when the concrete arrived, they added tons of water to the concrete. This is an old trick. I mean, we used to do this. This was like, we used to call this wet pours in the 80s and 90s. You'd find this, but not lately. And they wet the concrete so much. And what happens is it self levels, right? If you've never seen like an unlevel lake or pond, right? It self levels. But the problem is the aggregate sinks to the bottom. So it becomes like a 3-layer cake. You have your stone,
Well,
your
yeah.
sand, cement. And so it all failed. And it was a big issue. So to answer your question, we see it a
How
lot.
expensive was that job?
Oh, that job there, we were at about 180 grand, but when they were done, they went with somebody that was like 147,000. So they wanted to save a little money. And by the time they were done with legal fees, contractor had no assets. They had to rip it out. I think they had a $10,000 bond. It was horrible. I mean, it was a nightmare.
Wow. So they went from 180 bid to 147 to essentially probably double or triple pay the price.
2.5 times at least. Yeah, yeah, horrible.
How often does that happen? Watering down and
You see it? I mean, we're seeing all kinds of stuff. I accidentally built a name as kind of I get calls for a lot of these construction lawyers. And so I end up going out and being the one to try and figure out what happened. Or with our office, we get the call that like, hey, somebody poured all this concrete and it's discolored and we have to figure out like what happened and how to fix it. It it's a lot. I mean, we track it. So we see on average between a 10 and 20% increase in the number of, we call them problem jobs, meaning there's a problem with the work. Less than 3 years old is how we classify it internally. So work was done less than 3 years and has a problem. That number is increasing at least 10% a year for us. We're seeing number of leads that we get called for.
wow. How long does concrete last if it's done right?
Boy, it used to last a lot longer. It's weird. When like there are jobs that I did when I was a little kid with my dad 25 years ago that I feel like held up better than the stuff we do now, even though we pour the right mix. So, and when I say held up, I just mean like it sometimes can hairline crack, but if it's done right, I mean, you should see it for 50, 60, 70 years if you pour the right thickness, right mix, right water, all of that.
It's funny because in the roofing industry, it's very similar. So our asphalt shingles become thinner. So quality of the product supposed to go up, but the only real innovation that we have seen is underlayments. It's synthetic felt papers versus tar papers that we have. And now, you can have old 3-tab that's been there for like 30 years. And like, wow. But now new roofs last 18, 20 years. But on paper, 50 years, and they don't last that. I'm like, what the heck? What's happening to us? What would you say it takes to become successful in concrete business? Someone would start today. What do you have to be really good at? Trade, administration, and accounting, like to build a solid concrete company? What do you have to? What kind of traits you have to have?
I think you need to love the business. I think in this day and age where a lot of people are getting into the business for just profit, I think having a genuine love for the business gives you a leg up if you have the other things, which I'll get into. Um, you have to have a business mind. I mean, that was my big problem for many years was I identified as a contractor. So, I remember when the business was much smaller. I mean, now we have 14, 15 crews, but and we do residential, commercial work, but like back in the day, when I was in the field, I'd be like, "Oh, those idiots, like they, like did something stupid. Like they laid their mortar joints at half an inch, not 3/8. They didn't know what they're doing." But I didn't realize that that owner had, 12 crews and I had three. So what was I doing criticizing them? So I think having a business mindset, one of the biggest things that I regret not doing was finding companies that I could model because when I grew the business, I would get to a point where I'd look back and I'd say, gosh, a lot of what I'm doing right now, they were already doing. I'm doing things better, but it took me a lot longer. It's kind of like if you're going to hike a mountain, it's like you can take a trail and then maybe you take a shortcut, you walk halfway up and you say, huh, it might be shorter if I go off the trail and go this way. But the trail's already carved. I think in construction as a whole, when you can emulate and understand what other people are doing, like, I mean, like I ended up finding out that one of my competitors, I had all the same marketing companies that they were using, but I had tried like 5 or 6 other companies first on my own. They didn't work. I had to fire them. It didn't, things didn't happen. And then I ended up using this company, and one of my team members saw the logo of the marketing company on one of our competitors. I'm like, gosh, I could have looked that up 5 years ago. They've been using that company for, however many years. So I think there's a lot to be said for taking it slow, analyzing your competitors, and there's clues in the marketplace. And that's the big piece that I didn't understand.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And I agree with you. Reverse engineer your competitors. It's very easy, especially if you have tons of them. It's funny how contractors trying to hide from their competition how much they charge. I'm like, guys, you don't think everybody knows? It takes like 2 phone calls to find out the going rate. That's not a problem. I have a question about quality of the concrete. How often you have a bad quality of the concrete? Is it such a thing, or in your industry, it's mostly labor? Like if something goes wrong on a job, like what's the split between bad mix and bad labor or bad craftsmanship? How much can you allocate for job failure or quality failure to the aggregate itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not common. I had one there's a weird time frame in LA where I had gotten calls for like 5 or 6 projects that had this like black stains in concrete. And we sent a core sample out and they did find an impurity in the sand. They found something in the actual sand, but in, you know, give or take 18, 20 years of me doing this and doing a lot of fix it problems like that for other people's work, I very rarely see that. You'll see it more sometimes on the East Coast when you have the cold weather, and sometimes there's salts in the sand. You might have some issues, but I would say it's probably about 95 to 98% some issue with the workability. So, if you don't, well, let me back up. There's one caveat to that, and that's what we call a hot load. So that's when a truck shows up and they hit traffic, or, they went and tried to like, not so much as anymore, but they used to, what they would do is sometimes like small ready mix companies would, let's say I order 10 yard, or let's say I order 5 yards and they got another order for two, the truck holds, 9 or 10. They might try and sneak that 2 yard out and then go to me, and the load is only supposed to stay in the truck for 2 hours. So they might get to me at 2.5 hours and it's rolling in there. Like we call it a hot load, and it'll set up quick. So that's a problem, but you got to know how to look for that. But putting that aside, if you're not getting one of those, if you're not getting a hot load, then it's the labor, it's how much water you put in it, it's overworking it or underworking it. It's the art and craftsmanship of how you finish it.
A couple of years ago, I received a phone call from very big shot. The guy, I think it said he started and sold Geek Squad for Best Buy. So he moved to San Diego. He used to live in Minnesota, moved to San Diego, California. So he calls me because I started directory.com and he wanted to pick my brain about connecting contractor and homeowner. Here's what he told me. He said, Dmitry, I bought a house. I needed a driveway. And I called every contractor like within within my zip code, whatever the maps recommendation is. So he said no one called me back the same day. I'm literally waiting day after day. It's like, anybody wants my job? I need the concrete done. I need a new driveway. And he said I could not get a call back. And he asked me if it's a common problem. And I told him yes. Like, despite the fact how competitive we are, a lot of companies don't have receptionists, don't have a system in place where you actually answer your phone call immediately. A lot of times as business owner answer the phone call. Tell me, in your business, how common it is that you're the only one who actually showed up for estimate and other companies are still bidding and waiting for callbacks. Like, is it common or not? And how do you explain this problem?
I think you gotta fall in love with your customers. So we do that. I mean, we answer, like, our thing is follow up, and we have a CRM. Everything's automated, like follow ups, texts, things like that. But I think, I believe you should treat every customer like a millionaire, and if they're a millionaire, treat them like a billionaire. Like, make them feel great. Make them feel excited to talk to you. And I think if yeah, it's an old school thing that comes from like the guy or gal in the truck and they're running around and they leave the voicemail. I think like that reminds me of like back in the day when I was growing up and it was like the yellow pages was kind of phasing out and online was starting to come in and you homeowners expected a call within 2 to 3 days. Like they'd leave you a voicemail. You'd say, like, my dad used to say that he'd write down a list and he'd make calls, in like 2 days. He would be like, all right, I'll get all my leads and I'll call them all on Wednesday. And that was fine. But nowadays, forget it.
Is your dad still around the business?
Yeah, a little bit. He's kind of semi-retired now, but yeah.
What does he do for you? Does he work for your company or his business?
Back in the East Coast, and he's more semi-retired now, but he's going through a little bit of health stuff, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it's the main thing with him was my dad was that old school contractor. Like, he was passionate, he was hardworking, he was, a tough guy, but he showed me a lot of like the things that you can't place money on and you can't learn in school in terms of running a business, like those intangible things. But like modernizing the business, I think that's the marriage right now is like my dad, for example, if there was a new product or new anything in the market, we're talking in the late 90s, early 2000s. My dad used to be on a mail order list where any new products were coming out, my dad used to try it for free. He would pay the shipping, they'd send out the products, he'd use them, but so he loved the industry and he loved the products and things like that, but he didn't love marketing or sales or paperwork or, admin. And so he taught me like the love for the business and what that gets you, but that other part I had to learn. So it was cool to kind of see both ends of it.
Very cool. Yeah, people like that don't retire, by the way, unless they have to stop. They stop when they have to stop. It's never like their thing. It's not your will. Like, if they have, if they can walk, if they can talk, they're still gonna do it. Name couple biggest mistakes in concrete industry. What kind of mistakes new owners might make, or amateur guys?
I think not undervaluing the importance of business, I think, is a big one. They think they're getting in the concrete industry, but you're getting in business. And I didn't know that for many years. I have no business background. So like I was, we were in the many millions before I understood how to read a P&L or do any of that stuff. I mean, I was in the eight figures before I really understood like leadership and org charts. I mean, I pushed my way through. And I think looking back, understanding if I'm going to get into business, I'm competing with business people that understand this. And so I think that's important. I think understanding there's something to be said. One of the mistakes I made that was big was we used to do a lot of different things when we were small, right? We would do brick, block, stone, tile, stucco, concrete, waterproofing, grading, site work, drainage, right? So understanding the scale, like if you could look across the horizon and see that if you want to scale something, sometimes it's really good to be excellent at a few things and nowadays with marketing, you can reach people like never before. My dad used to say you have to do everything because he did more things because he wasn't as good as at marketing.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you become really good at marketing, you can do less services, specialize your crews. I mean, we're in a labor shortage, it's hard to find people,
yep,
you
yep.
know, materials. So if you specialize and then you get good at marketing and you respect the fact that somebody in your business needs to learn the business part, I think you're set up for success.
100% agree. I always say that doing less is doing more because you can scale it. And also, one of the reasons our parents, your dad, was doing everything is it comes from insecurities. Like we want to make sure we always have a job. If I don't have this, I can do this. If I don't do this, I do this. And that's insecurity. That's all it is. Or I'll paint walls if I don't have floors, or I'll build the deck. Like being a man of all trades, like jack of all trades, is, you know, it comes from the place where we have to provide. We always have to earn a dollar, and we want to be hired. We never want to be out of work. And was the answer? Learn it all. But that's actually the worst strategy you can think of. What advice would you give to the homeowner who is interviewing and reviewing quotes, interviewing concrete contractors? How to read a quote, what questions to ask your concrete guy, to feed the bad one out, to filter through someone who is not qualified maybe to do your project.
Well, I think there's the basic stuff, right? Like make sure to look for their license number, understand the company. I think if you can figure out the about story, like figure out where the company came from, there's clues there usually. There's some good businesses that maybe don't have the best photos or videos, right? If they've got a good family story. So that's important. Asking them questions about the work, right? Like how long is this going to take? Is there anywhere where you think the price might change? Is there any other ways in which this project might be able to be done? I think that gives you the knowledge factor, right? Because a lot of times concrete contractors will make decisions for you. Rebar on, 24 inches on center versus 18 versus some people do 16. Like what and why is that done is important. I think asking for pictures is a good one, right? Pictures of work. But then what I like to do is I like to ask then for what the address of the job is. So if somebody shows you a picture, yeah, I did this job, I did this one. Great. I really like this project. Can you give me the name of the person and the address? I'd love to either stop by or give them a call or both. License number is big. One thing we see a lot in LA is what we call paper contractors. So it's companies that look and feel just like we do. But I've got a yard with 16, 17 trucks, mixers, equipment, all that stuff, and they have nothing. They've got a shirt and then they subcontract it. So understanding the physical location of the business is a big one. Like if they say, yeah, I have my own team in house, great. Well, where do they keep their trucks, their shovels, their mixers? I know it's a silly question, but that's a huge red flag. Almost every project that I see issues with has some form of like a company that doesn't actually have the equipment or even if they do, they subcontracted it. There's a big connection there.
So they don't have liability, they just paper pushers. We have them in the roofing industry too. They're sales organizations. But I think to be fair to them, they have a niche because they fill this gap that was exists. So you have a lot of tradesmen, you have business owners, and you have this gap where contractors who should know how to run a business, how to sell and market. And because these guys don't want to sell and market, these companies act as a middleman. They essentially drag these lower people up in the business world by selling and advertising for them. So
We have that, but see, we don't have as much of that. I know what you're talking about, and I think ultimately I don't have a problem with those companies. I think I agree with what you just said. We have general contractors who, like, for example, let's say I'm at $17,000 for a project. You'll have a general contractor who's at 16 or 15.8, right? But what they're doing is they're paying someone cash and paying 9 grand.
oh,
So the homeowner's getting screwed because they're getting this person who's not licensed to do the work that doesn't actually control the labor. They're getting a manager who doesn't know the work as well as we do, and they're only saving whatever it is, 5% of the cost. And so we see that a lot in our market.
I see. uh, 1099s versus actual employees. I know in California you have to have employees. How do you set up? And how do those companies get away with the subcontracting? Because can you use subs? Can you use? Are you have to? Do you have to use employees? How does that work?
I mean, it's best for the homeowner if unless you're hiring a general contractor, and there's specific rules around what it means to be a general. Typically, it's more than two trades on a project. There's rules around how much they self-perform versus if they sub. But the general rule of thumb is as a homeowner, your best bet is to find a company. If it's a specialty trade, a lot of times we'll see like pools, for example. Pools are a great example of this. Like a general contractor will come in and they'll sub out all these different parts of a pool project. And then, they're coordinating with the electrician and then the plumber and then the shotcrete contractor and the pool plasterer. And it ends up with issues versus if you went with a pool company and they've got internally their own crews that do this
Yep.
work every day and they go from job to job to job, you find that you get a much better result. I know 1099 is a big thing in other states. It's a big problem.
It is a big problem. Are you struggling to hire actual employees? Is a labor shortage a thing in concrete world? Is it harder to find employees now than it used to be?
Oh, definitely hard. I mean, that's how the whole contractor consultants got started was the labor issue that I had and then figuring it out because it almost tanked my business. I mean, it was like impossible to hire in late 2019, early 2020. I couldn't find people. I mean, it was everything I was doing stopped working overnight.
Wow. What's the earning potential of the concrete worker, of the business owner? What kind of profit margins you run? Whatever you're willing to share. Like where's the money is? Who makes the most? Who makes the least? How do you attract people in your industry from money perspective?
So I mean, if you're in the business, like if you're good at concrete, it's not uncommon to make 40, 45 bucks an hour plus company truck, plus gas card, plus,
That's not bad.
yeah, somewhere around there. We do also do prevailing wage jobs, so government projects that have a prevailing wage. So on those jobs, they're making high 60s, low 70s. If they're skilled, laborers are making in the 40s or 50s. So I've always been incentivized. I enjoy doing that type of work more because I see the team get they get the pay increase, which I think is really good. And then I mean, in terms of margins, it varies. Certain types of work are less competitive and more niche, and you might see a high teens, low 20s margin. Sometimes if it's real custom, you might be in the mid 20s.
How do people get in contact with you? What do you do now? What's a contractor consultants? What you specialize in? And your contact information.
Yeah, so our thing right now is the hiring stuff. So I really we figured out we started with a problem which was me struggling to hire. It almost tanked the company. I lost nearly $1 million in 3 weeks. I had a couple celebrity homes I was doing. I was doing a project for the Veterans Cemetery of Los Angeles, and we were like at the top. Company was amazing, and I couldn't find people. Indeed wasn't working. Craigslist wasn't working. Zip wasn't working. We had referral companies, like smaller businesses that we knew that we would bring them in to help if we were ever running behind, and we just couldn't hire. And so I lost a bunch of money, contracts got canceled, and I literally almost blew the family business. So I set out to figure out what worked, found a system. We built it into a course called the Contractor Hiring Course. Got that endorsed by ZipRecruiter and Indeed. And then it became a situation where we had this product that was really good, but some contractors were too busy. And so now we do all of the hiring for companies. So we do all the job postings, the headline testing, the initial resume screening. So like if you were a client, you'd give us your needs. Hey, I want to hire, a project manager and two salespeople. Great. All you would then do is show up to final vetted interviews that are all pre-qualified based on your needs. And so we handle all that for you. We were talking earlier about enemies. I don't know if I can bring this up, but
Sure.
it's recruiters. Like I think the recruiter model takes advantage of contractors. And so we do a small monthly fee. We handle everything and they own the data. You can try as many people as you want. And there's no big fee. There's no like, hey, we're going to take 20% of the salary, or it's a staffing agency and you don't actually get the person. So that's what we're doing right now.
Love it. You still on the side of who runs the concrete business?
So I actually this company we built out, I guess it's over there. We built out the team. So it was funny because I built something that I was trying to help the industry with, but it ended up solving my problem. So I've got a COO, a chief revenue officer. I manage the business in, about 2 hours a week.
Just the concrete industry, or are you helping other industries as well?
All of them. We have roofing clients. We're in the US, we're in Canada. We'll probably be in the UK market in 4 to 6 months. But yeah, roofing, masonry, concrete, general contractors. I think there's 87 industries that we do, all construction.
Love it. Very good. All right, brother. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, we're going to put Matt's information in description below, also in the top comment. You can go connect, try it for yourself. Let us know how to do. Comment below if you like this episode. Give it a like for Matt. I'll see you guys in the next video.